listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. We always appreciate you joining us each and every week. As always, guys, lots to get to before we get to this week's episode, which is an amazing story. Oh my God. I can't even begin to tell you what's going to happen to you over the course of this episode. Very, very excited to talk to our guest. Remind you guys to get on all the social media sites that we're on, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hazard Ground Podcast, and follow us. Make sure that you're keeping up with everything we have going on here on the podcast, upcoming guests and things of that nature. Also remind you about our partnership with Amazon. Go to hazardground.com, the website, click on that Amazon banner right in the middle of the homepage, do all your Amazon shopping. We get a percentage of what you guys spend. What do we do with that money? We take it and we donate it back to the charities that you hear on the Hazard Ground Podcast. So important for you guys to be part of that partnership. And again, just go to hazardground.com, click on that Amazon banner, and you can help out vets all across the country from the comfort of your own home. If you like the show, and we know you do, please get on iTunes, leave us a rating and a review. Those are so important to us. We love the feedback. We love hearing from good, bad, and indifferent. But also the rating, helps us get more notoriety, helps us grow the podcast, bigger guests, bigger listeners, and everybody gets to hear these amazing stories about America's heroes. So with all that said, let's get on to this week's episode. Joining us this week is a guest with a very unique and peculiar situation. And I use the word peculiar because it's not something that we typically come across here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. He is a current Sergeant First Class and a Green Beret in the United States Army. While he was deployed overseas, after returning, doctors misdiagnosed him, and he ended up with stage 4 lung cancer. And joining us right now is Sergeant First Class Rich Stayskal from the Army. As well joining us is his attorney, Natalie Kawam, and she is here to help provide some legal background as to the pending litigation in Richard's case against the United States government. Richard, Natalie, thank you guys so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, lengthy introduction here, and I just wanted to clear it up for our listeners as to everything that's going on. And the long and short of it is, again, you were misdiagnosed by medical doctors, ended up with lung cancer, and now there is pending litigation for you against the government on your case. And for those listening who aren't military, if you don't know, if you're in the military, you're not allowed to sue the government. So this is a very, and again, that's why I used the word peculiar at the opening, a very peculiar and interesting case, but we want to get to it all and uncover it all. And let's start back at the beginning, Rich, and why and how you got into the military.
Yeah, absolutely. So originally I joined the military. I started off in the Marine Corps in 2001, served in 2005. 2004, I had been shot in combat downrange. I got out, served my country, and thought I was done, but I wasn't, so I joined back up in 2006. Decided to become a Green Beret. Went through the process from there and been serving as a Green Beret ever since to present time.
Now, did you sign up in 2001 just after 9/11? Was that the reason?
No, I had actually signed up right before.
Oh, okay.
Was just looking for something exciting to do in my life and wanted to be a part of a brotherhood, wanted to serve my country and, bring real purpose to my life.
Wow, that's interesting. So it had nothing to do with 9/11. You just were at the time. Were you done with high school? Were you done with college? Where were you in your life?
I was done with high school. Just didn't feel like I was ready for college yet. Felt there was something different out there for me, and that's where it led me.
All right. So when you go in 2001 and then 9/11 happens, did you feel like, oh my God, I made a bad decision?
No, absolutely not. It's like I said, becoming a part of a brotherhood and serving for, greater purpose other than just yourself. I don't ever feel that that's ever something you'd feel bad about, or something you wish you had done differently. So it's just it was a great thing that I wanted to do to serve my country.
Why the Marines?
Honestly, I was actually going to join the Air Force, believe it or not. And when I was walking into the recruiting office one day, there was a Marine there. He was standing there in his dress blues and just started talking to me. And the more I was looking at it, I was just like, man, that's a really nice uniform. And, the way he was talking about the Marine Corps just really sounded like it fit me as a person at the time in my life.
All right, so let's go back to that deployment in 2004, where you're in Ramadi, and you get shot by a sniper. Take me through the events of that day. Was it a normal morning? What were you guys doing? Where were you going? So on and so forth.
Yeah, it was a normal morning, just out on patrols, and I was with a part of the snipers at the time, so we were out just kind of hiding out and checking things, make sure everything was good. And then slowly, as things do, they just erupted over time, and we just ended up in a fierce fight. And in the midst of it, I was shot by a sniper through my left arm, went through my chest, and came out my back next to my spine. There I was medevaced out from there, and inadvertently through the time, it was a Green Beret medic who put my chest tube in. And that's actually the short of how I ended up where I'm at today, was wanting to pay back the service to somebody who saved me.
All right. Well, okay. So you talk about that very nonchalant, as if getting shot through the chest is going to pick up milk at the grocery store. Let's back up here for a minute. Did you know what happened when it happened? I mean, obviously you didn't see the sniper. That's why he's a sniper. But I mean, kind of give me some more background as to what the actual events were.
So we were sitting across by a river, just watching the roads. When everything started fighting, everybody started fighting. We pushed across the road into an open air field, and during that time, we were kind of getting spread out, and we had seen the sniper off to the left a little bit. There was just single shots going off, and before I knew it, I woke up on the ground. I didn't have a clue what had happened, and just kind of as everything came to, my sound started coming back, and I finally was, coming from being dazed and confused. I just realized, like, oh man, I think I was hurt. Didn't really click in until the corpsman had run over and was trying to provide a little bit of aid to me that I'd realized I'd been hurt at the time.
So I mean, I ask about what's it like getting shot. You don't even know the feeling. You just, next thing you know, you woke up, you were on the ground.
Well, when my feeling came to, the best I could describe it, felt like I was hit by a train. It was the best thing. I mean, it knocked me down, and when the pain finally came, it was some of the most unbearable stuff I could imagine a person could go through.
That's unreal. So, did you know you were shot, or did you just know you were injured, or what?
No, I had no clue. I just knew at the time the corpsman was just like, "Hey, you're bleeding from one spot." He could only find one spot, but that was my exit wound. But I knew I was hurt. I just didn't know. I didn't know how bad. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know if there was something exploded or if it was a gunshot. And I think that's probably why I talk about it a little nonchalant. Was some of it was so surreal,
right?
That it even to this day, I kind of think back and I'm like, wait, did that really happen? And so it was, not like the movies, that's for sure.
Yeah. Rich, did you think you were going to die?
I didn't know what to think at the time, except for there was still stuff to be done. I remember thinking, people were. I knew people were still fighting. I could see my friends running around, and still being engaged. So I mean, I knew as much as I do remember. I kind of propped my gun up on the magazine well, and I fired off what last rounds I had in the direction of where I knew people were. I knew there was stuff still going on, but couldn't tell you how long it was going to last or what the next move was. Just kind of played it by ear as it went.
At what point in time do you realize that, oh, this is bad? I mean, there's something really wrong here.
I knew, like I said, I knew I was hurt, but I didn't know how bad, so I think that between that and the adrenaline that was still going on, I don't think I wanted to panic because I didn't want to realize it was bad. So, I just kind of blocked it out. And I remember I walked back up to a tracked vehicle, and I got in with the rest of the wounded, and they took us over to the cache to the hospital.
Walked?
I walked. Had a couple of buddies kind of helped me, escorted me out, but for the most part, yeah, walked myself out, got into the vehicle. I don't like to be a burden on people, so I didn't really feel like I needed anyone's help at the time. There's still stuff being done.
All right, so when you get medevaced out, where do you end up going, and what are you told? I mean, at this point, you've been shot, but do you know the extent of your wounds?
No, I just when I got to the cache, the hospital, they were kind of talking to me, but I think at that time I was kind of, from what I remember, fading in and out a little bit, so I didn't understand the severity of what was going on. I just knew I was injured, but I I do remember at that point was when an 18 Delta Special Forces Green Beret medic came in, and he was holding the scalpel, and he was just like, "Hey, this is going to hurt real bad." And I remember that's when he started putting my chest tube in, and of course from there the sheer pain of it all was unbearable, and I passed out eventually from there.
No morphine? They didn't give you any?
I couldn't say if they did or not. I don't remember if they did. It didn't do a whole lot.
Okay.
So it was pretty painful.
But were you having trouble breathing? Because you said you were shot through the lung. You didn't know it at the time, but were you having trouble breathing? Could you tell the medics what was going on?
No, I didn't have a clue. I just, I knew I was hurting, but I not enough. Just the pain was just overall so bad that, I couldn't really describe much at the time. I think I was still pretty much out of my mind a little bit at the time.
All right, chest tube in. When do you actually get airlifted to a cache?
So as once you told me, this is going to hurt, that was pretty much, I went out from there. And then I don't remember much from there till pretty much I got to the States was the last thing, the next thing I remember.
Really? You don't wake up in Germany at any point in time and realize where you are, or you just don't remember it?
Not much that I remember. I don't think I was awake much any if I was.
All right, so let's get you to the States, okay? You wake up in Walter Reed, I assume, and you get the full extent of what went on from who?
From one of the nurses. I remember I was being wheeled off, and I remember being in such excruciating pain. I didn't know what was going on. I was trying to figure it all out at the time. They finally, a nurse came in and started telling me about everything, about how lucky I've been. And, hey, you're really lucky to be alive. And, I can't believe you made it out. And doctors are talking about you. And to me, I'm sitting there just like, okay, I don't understand like what the big deal is, like people get hurt, whatever. So she was just telling me this, and she starts explaining to me the path of the bullet and everything. And I was just kind of, I didn't understand medical stuff, but I was like, okay, thank you. I guess I appreciate it. And so eventually they asked me if I'd do an interview, and I, was like, okay, sure. I'll do one. And, they just kept saying, like, you don't understand, like you're really, really lucky. This grazed by your major arteries. It barely missed your heart, barely missed your spine, and, went through your lung. And just like, oh, okay. And so, I did the interview, and then they talked to my parents. And that was kind of when slowly over time, I started really realizing, okay, I guess this was a big deal, and it was really close. So.
Now, because of the injury, you said you got out. Did they medically retire you, or you chose to just get out?
No, I went back, and, the deployment finished up, and I, worked on getting better. And I eventually, at the time, a lot of my grandparents were sick, and they were passing away. And my mom asked me to get out for a little bit. She just, they were having a hard time, and, I didn't feel like I already put them through enough and everything. So I, agreed. She said, give me 1 year as a civilian. If you don't like it, then I'll be totally okay and blessed with you going back. And so I did that at my mother's wish, and about a year to date, I was like, I had started remembering all the things, the 18 Delta that had helped me, that all the guys that were still doing stuff, all the amazing things I'd seen. And I missed it. I wanted to go back and continue serving my country.
Do you remember that medic's name that saved your life?
I at one point, I actually ran into another Green Beret who said, he had told me that medic would tell that story when he would teach his rotations for other Green Berets, but he didn't know his name either, and I wish I could ever figure it out.
Really? So you have no idea?
No, sir.
Do you remember what he looks like? Anything?
No, no, I don't.
Wow.
Everybody was a little bit different looking back then.
Well, true, but I mean, something that you just as a distinguishable characteristic, in a hazy moment where you might have remembered something about him. Does it bother you? You don't know who it is?
At first I was kind of like, I really want to meet this guy. I really want to thank him. But, I've really, once I became a Green Beret, I really learned that, you don't really do it for the accolades. You don't do it for people to tell you. And, I just felt like he did his job. He was proud of doing his job. And, and sometimes, I've learned I'm the same way at times, and it's perfectly happy with that. And I'm sure he's come across something about me before, and he knows that, he saved my life, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I'm not proposing that you want to meet him to give him accolades, but a simple thank you. I mean, I get it. Look, I deployed with the Special Forces, so I understand the community and what you're saying wholeheartedly, and I agree. You're never at this job looking for somebody to pin a medal on your chest to recognize your efforts. You do it because it's what you're supposed to do. But that said, when you fight side by side with guys and you take care of each other, it's okay to give each other a hug in the end and say, thanks, brother. Glad you were with me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of more where I'm asking the question for.
If I had the opportunity, yeah, I absolutely would. If somebody was like, hey, I know that guy, I'd love to at least talk to him on the phone and tell him thank you for sure. I mean, I'm here today probably solely because of him.
So you have this year off. At any point during the year, did you come to the decision before the year was up that I'm going back? Like, did you know, or did you kind of just honestly get away from it mentally and go, I'm really going to give this civilian thing a try?
Well, no, I got out. My father owned a construction business, and so I was working for him and my brother. They were helping me. I was getting my feet settled. I had an apartment. I had my own place. I had a great job. Truck, everything. I had no issues settling back into civilian life. I was making more money than I ever made being in the military. It didn't make me happy at the end of the day. It just, it just wasn't my calling in life. And, so I still felt there was more for me to do. And, just that ultimately, I went home and I talked to my mom one day. I said, I love what I'm doing. I'm thankful for everything you all continue to do for me, but I think I need to go back and finish this out. Of course, she wasn't ultimately happy.
Right.
She was happy for me that I found something, but of course, she was scared.
At any point in time during that year, are you having any medical problems whatsoever from your wounds?
No.
None.
No. I had to redo a physical and everything, and go back through the process to join again. So, no, I had no issues, and nor did anybody find any issues.
Why'd you go? Did you go Special Forces just because of that medic, and that's the reason you went to the Army? No desire to go back to the Marine Corps?
The Marines they have their standards. Once you leave, they weren't looking for anybody to return at the time. But honestly, no, I wanted to repay back that service. I just thought I didn't know guys like that existed at the time. And I just thought, man, that's crazy. That's awesome. And I really wanted to be that guy. I thought, it was amazing what he was giving back to not just his country, but his countrymen at the same time, Yeah. And I wanted to repay that exact service as best that I could.
What was the hardest part about becoming a Green Beret that you think?
I got a lot of the typical answers I could give you, but my answer would honestly be is not letting everybody convince you that you couldn't do it. All the horror stories of, that you're going to have to climb the biggest mountains in the world and everything else. It's just, believing that every day has to end and there's always the next day. Everything is doable if you just put your head down and you keep pushing through it and you believe in yourself.
So what year is this when you get back in?
2006, summer of.
Okay, 2006. Over the course of the next 11 years, how many times do you deploy?
About two officially to Iraq, and then several others, just various places all over the globe.
Okay. And to that end, and what I'm leading to is, again, your current situation. No other physical ailments, no other physical problems. You pass every medical physical along the way.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I mean, I had to. There was
that's what I'm saying.
I had to go to. Other schools that demand a physical. You have to pass it. You got to be physically fit. No issues, and to continue on. Yep.
All right. I don't want to fast forward too much because obviously there's critical stuff that goes on in between. Over the course of these deployments that you're on, never any desire to get out. Always want to keep going. Nothing happens that changes your mind or changes your scope of what you're doing.
No, my career kept going. I was happy with it. there were still things I wanted to do. And actually, not like you said, not to fast forward too much, but the week before I had found out I was sick, I was starting the warrant officer course. I was going to become a warrant officer, go back to a team. I had the next 15 years of my life planned out in the military. I planned on working till about 58, 60 had the military kept me.
That's amazing. But you do get married along the way somewhere in there, right?
Oh, yes, sir. I married in 2006. So.
Well, and I bring that up because your wife starts to play a critical role in helping you kind of figure out what's going on. Okay, again, there's so much to get to, but I mean, the crux of why this story is so important is because of what comes up in June of 2017. So when do you start to realize that you're having breathing issues?
About January. Well, the issues started occurring probably around March, April of 2017.
Okay. Like what's happened? Just kind of give me some of the symptoms that you were experiencing.
Yeah, so my first symptoms were I was wheezing, coughing, just short of breath. I was having trouble laying flat, so I was starting to sleep kind of elevated. Those were the first initial ones that were. Do
you think you're just sick, though? Do you think it's a cold? Do you think it's a cough? I mean, what are you initially thinking?
Yeah, well, we hadn't lived in North Carolina very long, and I do have allergies, so I kind of thought, this is just the time of the year that things are coming around. So I wasn't thinking too much of it at the time. Just that,
First visit,
taking some Claritin.
Right. First visit to a military doctor because of it was when?
May 15th.
Okay, May 15th.
Went to the ER. I was at work and just wasn't feeling so great. And it was the first time I probably could say, I was sitting there just like, wow, I'm not feeling the best. I should probably go get looked at. So I went down to their clinic where they treat students who are becoming Green Berets, and I sought some help from the 18 Delta. And he's just looking at me, and he's like, "Hey, you think you're all right?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe I'm all right." Just being weird. And he's like, "No, I don't think that you are." He's like, "I'm pretty good at my job." And I was like, "All right, I'm probably not doing so well." And so he's like, "Go in here, lay down, do an EKG." He's like, let me check some stuff on you. And so shortly after that, he called an ambulance for me and sent me to the hospital.
It's interesting. Did he try to give you a shot? Because my experience in deploying with them, there was a shot that cured every ailment from the Special Forces medics. It was just bend over, drop your pants, I'm going to put a needle in your backside, and everything was good an hour later. Like, honestly, it was the best form of medicine I ever experienced in my life. I want every visit to the doctor to be that. Here's a shot, you'll feel better in an hour. Great. So.
Yeah, no, he really, the medics are something else. They really look at you and make sure that they're doing the best care now. Everybody wants longevity now rather than just a quick fix. So, I'm glad for what he did. That's for sure.
All right. So they rush you to the hospital. What do they tell you at this point in time?
At this point in time, they looked at my scans from the past. They did an X-ray on my chest, had me do a breathing treatment, and told me it's possible I could have walking pneumonia. They didn't really say much other than that, and they, from there, just discharged me.
Okay. You get the day off, you go home, you get a week off. What do they give you? What do they tell you? Or are you back to work the next day?
I went home. I just went home that day and just kind of, just took some rest and slept a little bit and tried to figure out if there was something else going on that maybe I was missing.
Did you ever contemplate at this point in time, like just taking some time off, taking leave, getting away from anything, just to sort of recharge?
Well, I had been kind of slowing down from where I was working because, like I said, I was getting ready for the warrant officer course. So I really wasn't going at such a fast pace as one would think. I actually was taking the necessary breaks because I knew once the course did start, I was in it for a while.
Right. Well, and the only reason I ask that, for those who don't know anything about the Special Forces lifestyle, if you will, it's hard to find guys who know how to slow down. It's the nature of the work. It's the way you guys are cut, the mold that you're cut from. That's dynamically different than most people. You have that different gear. So I was just curious if you ever, were just like, nope, I'm going to keep going. Because this is what I'm supposed to do. My team needs me and everything else. So, okay, so you're discharged from the hospital. Next visit back is when?
May 22nd, 1 week later.
Okay, 1 week later. What happens?
So this time I was at work, and I called my wife, and it was the same thing except a little bit worse. Now my vision's getting a little blurry, and I'm having trouble breathing. I'm feeling just not right, and so I called my wife. I was calling everybody, trying to figure out what do I do. So I went to work, talked to my chain of command just to see what their thoughts were. And at this point, everybody's looking at me again, just like, man, are you okay? And I'm like, no, I really don't think I'm doing okay this time. And this time I was, kind of hunched over on like the file cabinet. I was really just having a little bit more trouble. So this time they put me in my car and drove me out in town to an ER out in town to see, they figured, I wasn't getting the care that I should have been getting on post. So they sent me out there. This time, by the time I got there, my wife was there. I was pretty much hunched over, passed out. They picked me up, put me in a wheelchair, took me into the hospital. And then eventually there, I pretty much was unresponsive. I was just unconscious. And so according to my wife, they did the old sternum rub on me with the knuckles and got me to come to. And then I was awake from there and went through some work tests from there. Breathing treatment again. This time did an echocardiogram, did x-rays again, and still nothing to be found.
And there is no thought whatsoever that you're telling, hey, by the way, I was shot in the lung, a dozen years ago. Do you think it has anything to do with that? Did that ever come up?
Yeah, well, we bring it up all the time. I try to divulge everything. At this point, I'm generally concerned because this isn't something normal that I experience or have experienced. Like you said, typically when you're doing this line of work, you're physically fit and you're pretty in tune with your body, and when things are off. But I don't sugarcoat things when I go to the doctor, so I don't like to be there. So I try to divulge, hey, I've been shot or I've had this injury, so we can play it out and come to a conclusion.
All right. So after this visit and all these tests, what are they telling you? Everything is still fine?
Same thing, just possibility of
pneumonia.
Walking pneumonia, nothing new. They couldn't figure it out, so they discharged me from there.
The civilian hospital discharged you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What happens next?
From there, I was waiting. I had an appointment for a specialist that had been scheduled for me from the doctor on post. But now, in between waiting and seeing this doctor, I ended up starting to cough up blood at this point. It was started off slowly. It was just a little bit here and there, and then it by the time it really got to the height of it all, not to get too graphic here, but I was coughing it up in globs that just I couldn't even sleep flat because I felt like I was drowning with blood.
Huh.
So I had to sit up, and there wasn't much I could do but just kind of try to stay calm and just work through it. So eventually I had to go to my chain of command, who was asking me, is everything going all right? Are you getting the help you need? And I was like, no, I'm not. I really need to be seen by a specialist. I'm calling everybody. I'm calling all the healthcare providers. I'm calling the specialists. I'm begging for help. I keep getting told, just go to the ER. You got to wait. You just got to keep waiting for your appointment. So my commander went down to the hospital, talked to the specialist. Specialist finally agreed. He's like, all right, you can go off post. So he released me to go off post. And then I went and scheduled an appointment out in town with a civilian provider.
And they tell you what?
So at this point, I take my records down. They look through a couple, and then they call me back right away. They're like, hey, we need more stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. So I bring them everything I got. They get me in there within a couple days. I was in there quick. Before I knew it, I go in. I do. They did a breathing test again. I see the doctor. The doctor, one of the last questions he asked me, he's like, hey, have you been bleeding? And I was like, I have. He's like, all right, you need to go downstairs right now and do a scan. And he's like, I'll call you. So I do the scan. I go home, and he called me about the next day, and he's like, all right, there's something funny there, and I need you to come in for a biopsy. And it's like, if I could get you in tomorrow, I'd have you in tomorrow, but it'll be like 2-3 days. So from there, I go in, I do a outpatient biopsy, and I wake up, and my wife's crying, and the doctor's telling me I have at the time, stage 3A lung cancer.
All right. You hear the word cancer, and you ask us if anybody, it doesn't have to be a veteran or a military member. What goes through your head?
I didn't know what to think at the time. Just kind of just disbelief, It was kind of unreal. I never thought, I tried to stay healthy my whole life. I wasn't the best at it, but I wasn't the worst at it for sure. So it was just kind of a shock, It was just like, felt like somebody was lying to you almost.
I can't imagine, and I'm a very healthy guy. I work out all the time still. What you're going through is like my worst fear, that one day you wake up out of the blue and everything goes horribly wrong and you find out you have cancer or something that, is possibly going to take your life. Is there any sense of, how the hell did I survive what I survived in a gunshot wound and now I have cancer?
Oh, absolutely. But, to kind of rewind a little bit, the troubling part about all this is, before my symptoms ever started in January of 2017, I was actually getting ready to go to dive school. That was when I had done my physical, and it was mandatory because of my injury that I had to do a CT scan. Mm-hmm. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Had to do the CT scan to go down there
to check your lungs to make sure that. Just for clarity for people, when you die, diving puts a lot of pressure on your lungs, especially the way the military does it. Sometimes it's straight, diving, and your lungs get pressurized because of the lack of oxygen and everything. And so they're doing this test to make sure the capacity of your lungs is good. Correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the troubling part is that when they cleared me in January of 2017, the mass was there. The mass was on my chest in 2017.
How did they know? Wait, how did you know that? I'm sorry to cut you off. I'm just trying to figure out.
Oh, no. Well, when you can go back and look at the scans dated from then.
Okay. So they looked back at the film and they saw that this thing was there since then.
Yep. So
okay.
It was there from then. It was noticed, and it was noticed, documented, and everything, even on my first ER trip to the hospital on post.
They documented it.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
So that's where all this really comes into play. The 6 months I went untreated, and nobody ever told me about it. They knew about it.
Okay. Does the doctor who diagnoses you with the cancer, do they think at any point in time this is because, can you get cancer from a gunshot wound, or are the two things totally unrelated?
Hey, no, I'm not a doctor. I wouldn't be qualified to answer that.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay. Do any of the doctors ever bring up that there may be a correlation, or no? That's never even talked about.
No, never even discussed.
Right. Okay. And again, I'm just trying to ascertain from my own kind of understanding if there's any way that one led to the other. It doesn't seem. Again, I'm not a doctor either, and again, we'll defer to Natalie, our lawyer, on the line in a minute. But I didn't know if there was any way to figure out if one resulted in the other. Okay, so. Let's kind of, before we bring in Natalie and the legal stuff, because I want to find out when you bring her in on this whole thing. You have this diagnosis. You realize that it has been misdiagnosed several times over. What are you telling your chain of command? What are people around you saying? What is the military saying to you? Is any of these conversations starting yet?
No, not at the time. We were still going through all the medical stuff. They wanted to know if I was ever a smoker. No, I've never smoked. They wanted to know if I, ever been around it all the time. And it was, no. So the concern at the time was just figuring out what to do next, so that was the biggest concern. So it was just talking to the doctors. I'd go up to Duke, and, the discussion was, all right, we're going to do chemo. We're going to try to, kill it as best we can and take care of it with surgery and remove it. So that was really the big focus. My chain of command was extremely supportive. They've been amazing to this whole thing. So they just, hey, anything you need, Rich, we got you here. So I just went on from there. At the time, we really hadn't discussed a whole lot with Natalie. It was just about health.
Do you have a prognosis of how long you're going to live? Do they tell you this?
My prognosis is pretty much just keep taking the medicine you're on right now, and it stops. We'll see what we can do. So it's with cancer, it's tricky. It's my medicine, it's not today. and I could have very, very, very short time, but that's, I don't think anybody can predict that but God himself.
Right. Okay. All right. I just didn't know if they gave you, hey, we're at stage 3.
Yeah.
Here.
I mean, in general, the prognosis is just not very good. I guess more
obviously.
or less, I hate saying it, so maybe that's why I'm dancing around it just a little bit here.
No, that's fair. Listen, I mean, God bless you. I mean, I hope you, the whatever the prognosis was, you beat it like you have everything else so far. So, all right. At what point in time does the idea of a lawsuit come up, or, do you ever get to does your wife say to you, well, can't we fight this somehow? I mean, they screwed this up. Don't they owe us something?
Well, so how it kind of came up was, my wife and I, more her than me, if anything, she was just looking through my medical records, the papers that they give us when we leave the hospital. And, nothing looked right. Nothing added up. It was like, well, how come it says this, but they supposedly didn't know about it, or why didn't anybody tell me, but it says it right here. So nothing made sense. So we started asking questions. Before we knew it, we kind of put the pieces together, and it was like, oh my gosh, they knew. They just never told me. So, of course, everybody's like, oh, I'll sue them. Everybody throws out that.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I'm so angry at this point. I'm like, oh, I had all this chance of survival. What are you doing to my family, my career, my life? So the more I started looking into it, it was like roadblock after roadblock. It was like nobody would touch me. Nobody wanted to talk about it. And then it was like every legal person I talked to was just like, you can't do this. And I'm like, why? Like, you just can't. Like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. So we just kept asking questions. And it just got to the point where it was like, how can you tell me you can not tell somebody about their cancer and that's perfectly okay and acceptable? And in a world that we say people are accountable for their actions and everything else. And it just didn't sit well with me. And before I knew it, my mom was like, hey, I reached out to these people because my wife had been calling attorney after attorney. And once they heard I was active duty, they were like, pretty much might as well have hung up the phone on it. Nobody wanted to even talk to us. So my mom was like, hey, we're going to, they're going to call us. We'll talk to them. And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to listen as usual. So I got on the phone. I probably, gave them a half story just because I was like, wasting my time here. Before I knew it, Natalie's in the background like, all right, what are we going to do about this? How are we going to fix this? This isn't right. And I was like, oh, maybe there's a slim chance. And before I knew it, we were getting phone calls, it was emails, and they were following through. And it was like, wow, somebody's actually going to listen to us. Somebody's actually hears that this is not correct and this is not just. And that's kind of where, and then it just kind of spiraled from there. And here we are today.
One more question, Rich.
Yeah.
How angry are you at all of this? I mean, at what point in time do you break down? Because it's got to be infuriating to know that that doctor after doctor missed this. It's like, what the hell? We're supposed to be the finest at what we do in America, right? I mean, that's what the military is. Yeah. And the fact that so many people miss this, are you angry?
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't angry to some degree, but I was angrier in the beginning for sure. But, like anybody kind of could contest, anger doesn't get you anywhere. It's the cool, calm, and collected thoughts and decisive planning that gets you somewhere, and I've tried my best to keep it at that because that's what's going to get the job done at the end of the day, not me just beating on walls and throwing things around and throwing temper tantrums. I'm angry. Don't get me wrong, but there's a time and place for it. And right now I'm trying to do the right time, the right place, and just keep that set aside, All
right, let's bring in again Natalie Kawam. She's your attorney. Natalie, I don't know. Had you known about the Feres Doctrine prior to looking at Richard's case? And again, for those who don't know, the Feres Doctrine, it's about a 60-year-old policy that basically says for people who are in the military, you're not allowed to sue the government. That's the long and the short of it. But were you aware of this, and did that deter you at all?
No, I wasn't aware of it. I heard about it before. I practiced in federal court, so I remember hearing Feres Doctrine before, but never really looked into it. And when I was told that nobody will take this case, when he said, nobody wants to take this case because of the Feres Doctrine, I just thought, like, that's just a stupid reason. Because I know that should be like blatantly like an obvious reason, but I don't back down that easily. I was very upset about this. So I thought, well, we've got to fix this, and he has to be made whole. And then when I looked into it, I just thought the more I looked into it, the more I was convinced that it was just a bad law. So when we pursued it, everybody started I like to check my facts a lot, and I started realizing that this happens a lot. When I spoke to some attorneys around the country that specialize in military and veterans law, they said, yes, stay away from this case. It's a loser. And that even made me more upset. So that fuel became this fire, now this bonfire that we have going on. And I looked at it as 3 parts. Awareness is so important. It's so essential that people aren't aware of something until it happens to them, just like with cancer, just like with, divorce. And, bad things happen, then you learn about it, but it's too late when you learn about it. So one of those things is I wanted to make sure that we get the word out with what this Feres Doctrine is and how unfair it is, because there's not a person in the world, at least that has a pulse, that would say, that's a great idea. That's a great law. Let's bar people from being able to made whole. Number 2, looked at it as this is something that we need to fight anyhow. So we're going to court. We filed it. And our argument is that, hey, it's discriminatory. Anyone can sue in the United States of America. Illegals can sue for malpractice. Inmates can sue for malpractice. Everyone but our own military, our own active members that served and protect our country. So that's just the ironies that we enjoy the freedoms that they give us, but ironically, they don't have the same freedoms that we've given.
I'm sorry. And part of the reason I was questioning before if any doctor had made the correlation is because that's part of what the Feres Doctrine is. It's injuries sustained due to a result of military service. And I don't know, again, I'll leave the legal expertise to you, but that's why I was trying to make that connection. If that's what they're saying is that the bullet wound caused the cancer, and here we are, is that a defense that they're going to try to apply?
You're asking the right question. Unfortunately, no one has the right answer, because this wasn't this was not, okay, let's just back up. For the Feres Doctrine, it's supposed to be any kind of injury sustained in combat or service related.
Right.
There's no combat at Womack Hospital. I mean, probably the only combat they have going on is, can they stop malpracticing on people? That's the combat that's going on there. Number 2, there is no incident to service here. This was a typical physical checkup he had, like one of those annual physicals that he had to do to continue service.
So the Feres Doctrine might not even apply in that case, right?
That's correct. But unfortunately, this is the problem. Unfortunately, we're seeing cases by cases. By the way, this is not just Richard's case. I just want everyone to know that. I'd love for it to be just Richard's case, but it's not. This is happening all over the country to our servicemen and women. That's why we need to change this law. It's one thing if it's like an isolated incident and happened to Richard and God, he got screwed, too bad, good luck. No, this is happening everywhere. I'm getting phone calls from everyone all over the country. And I'm sitting there going, God, I cannot believe that they're applying this law that doesn't apply. I'm talking about people who are breastfeeding. That has nothing to do with service that they're causing. They're saying, don't worry about it. Let's put it this way. This Feres Doctrine barring is being misapplied, and it's not correct. So that's why we're challenging it for 2 reasons. If the courts keep on holding this issue as if you're in uniform, then you're barred. That's what essentially they're doing. Even though the law may say one thing, they're applying it broadly to all people that are in service from being able to pursue a claim against the government.
When you filed this in court, what was the immediate response from the government?
It's barred from Feres Doctrine.
But that was it.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. I want to say it, but they didn't say that. That's what I'm saying. They're misapplying this law, but it's a bigger issue than that. Let's just say this. Let's just pretend and give them the argument that this happened in when he was, from the bullet getting poisoned or something from the bullet. It doesn't make sense why a doctor, when you're going in there, I understand if you have an injury, you're shot in the leg and it's the middle of combat, and they use a tourniquet, and accidentally they have to amputate his leg because it could have easily been surgically removed, but they messed up. I get that. You want to bar those kind of malpractice claims because it's in combat. It's an emergency situation. But we're talking about our military that are being treated on U.S. soil in hospitals, not in combat. So there's an issue with this. This was not foreseeable. He didn't sign up to go into the military to say, hey, look, if I ever get malpractice on, I want to be able to be barred from being able to pursue a claim. Well, it's not about the claim here. It's about equal rights. He did not sign up to service so that way some inept doctor didn't do his job. And when they saw the cancer, they didn't tell him. That's gross malpractice. That's practically manslaughter. So we have an issue here of not only are we losing our soldiers, we're losing a hero here. And what do we do? We're protecting the malpractitioners. It doesn't make sense. There's no equity here. It doesn't make sense. So what we're doing, in addition to following the claim, we're also going to Congress and we're asking Congress to do this bill so that way we fix the law, just like anything else in the world that we have. One time they used to say separate is equal, and black people had to be in the back of the bus, and people say, well, that's the law. Well, yeah, the law sucks at times, and sometimes we got to change the law because it's not fair. We learned that through gay marriages. We learned that through so many issues out there that we've reversed the law. So this is one of those laws that just doesn't make sense, or it's unfair, and it needs to be reversed. And that's why we're going to Congress to write this law, to right this wrong, basically.
What do you feel is more likely to happen, this case to see a courtroom or to Congress make a change to the doctrine first?
I think Congress. I believe in it. I believe it's, and I hate to say it, but it takes an act of Congress. It really does. Because the courts have held, and I hate to get too legal on you, but Scalia years ago when he was alive wrote a dissent and said, this is not how it should be. We shouldn't be barring our servicemen and women from being able to be made whole or, have a recourse. However, we're a court. We don't write the law. We just interpret it. And
Right.
If we're interpreting it differently or wrongly, then that's Congress's job, legislation, to do legislation to fix this. And that's what we're doing.
Richard, I want to bring you back in here for a moment. The fact that Natalie took this case, what does it mean to you?
It means a lot. It's almost hard to put in words. It's Natalie has been amazing. The sheer fact that anybody just listening to us and believed in us. At a time where everybody just said, "No, you can't do this. Go away." I almost just lose words for it all, to be honest.
Richard, what is your hope level for this whole thing? I mean, is it one of those things where, at a minimum, if you can get the Feres Doctrine changed, do you feel like you've done your part, or is there some grander, bigger thing that you're hoping for? I mean, outside of your health, obviously, and I don't mean to, put that aside. That is obviously the most important thing here. But, that aside, which, sometimes you can't control the outcome of what's going on with your health, you have a little bit of say in how this whole thing plays out on the litigious side. So what is your hope for that?
My hope is the same. I believe Congress. I believe it'll take place in a legislative review. I do have hopes. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's times where I'm like, oh man, this is a different animal. This is something I never trained for this. This was not something I would thought I'd ever be doing. And luckily Natalie is driving this train a lot, and I'm thankful for it. But I believe it's going to work. I believe they're going to see an issue. I believe this is the right time. This is the right time and place within our society that people are going to see this as unjust. They're going to see it's unfair. They're just going to see it's just downright. This is not the way things work. So I have a lot of hopes, and it means a lot to me. It means a lot that, this isn't just about me. This is an old law that's been going around for almost 70 years. I mean, the amount of people that it's caused harm to is what's unjust about it. And the fact that it could continue to cause harm, and that's what's driving me to fix this.
Okay, so both of you can answer this. Natalie, let's start with you. Where is everything right now from a legal standpoint?
Well, so we received the government's response saying it's barred by Feres Doctrine. We're going to be filing in federal court in the Eastern District of North Carolina. We're looking to pursue, doing some kind of writ to the Supreme Court to review this based on this law is discriminatory in effect. And tell me if you want me to get legal about it or not. But
no, go ahead. I mean, give it in legal terms. If I have questions, I'll ask.
Okay. So an application of a law, when a law is applied, it has to be reviewed as whether it's discriminatory or not. Like to say Black people can't vote, that's discrimination on its face. We can't isolate one protected class. Well, this doesn't say anything about Black, white, age, or anything. But what it does do is, in effect, it basically bars only one protected group of people from being able to pursue a claim of malpractice. Only one set of people, and that are active service members. So that basically means if you wake up in the morning and you zipper your uniform, you have no rights that everyone else has. So it isolates or distinguishes or picks out a certain group of people that cannot have the same rights as everyone else in the country. So, for example, I used to work at the Department of Health and Human Services. If they ever done anything to me or hurt me, I would have a right to pursue a claim against them, even though I work for the government. Why is it that this is the only branch, this is the only people that cannot pursue a claim against their employer? It's discriminatory in effect. There used to be years ago, they used to say there was a law that said you have to take a test to vote. And what happened was they challenged that law and they said it's discriminatory. And you say, how is that possible? How is it discriminatory? Well, what they were saying was it's discriminatory against minorities because the minorities are usually going to be the ones who actually end up failing the test and are not going to be able to vote. So in effect, it discriminates against a certain population of people. So here, our argument is this law isolates and just bars a certain class of people. Everyone else can sue. Inmates can sue, like I said, immigrants, illegals. It doesn't matter. It's just the only people who cannot are service members. And that's where we challenge the application of this law and why it just bars certain people. There's no rhyme or reason why you're barring someone from being able to pursue a claim of malpractice. And it's being overbroadly applied. So there it is.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Natalie. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's it.
No, so in short, then, you're basically waiting for a federal judge to rule on whether the application of the Feres Doctrine applies to Richard's case.
That's correct. They've already said it does. I mean, how about this? The government's answer was this is barred by the Feres Doctrine. So it's going to go through the same process that all these other Feres Doctrine cases are going through, which one of them went to the Ninth Circuit, and they said, hey, if there's a reason why it should be changed, it's now. And they said, but sorry, if Feres Doctrine bars you, take it to the Supreme Court. Problem is that this has happened so many times over and over. These cases are always challenged and always, unfortunately, lose. That's why we're looking at Congress to change this, fix this situation for our service members. And we're also arguing that, if I'm going to use two forums, I'm going to use the legislative process and I'm going to use the legal process. I hope that the legal process fixes it and says, yeah, this is a discriminatory law. We're going to get rid of it. But other than that, we are very hopeful for the Congress to do something because everyone we spoke with and everyone we visited with was very supportive of this. There's no one that's going to say, yeah, I think our service members should suffer from malpractice and also be barred from being able to pursue a claim or be made whole. There's not right to bar someone from being able to seek recourse. So
just so I'm clear, do you need Congress to pivot on the Feres Doctrine in order for the case to go forward?
It's not for the case to go forward. It's for fixing the case for others.
Okay.
We can push the case to go forward, which we're doing. It's just that what's going to happen is, unfortunately, I have a feeling that they're going to say, just like the Supreme Court did before, you know what? If Congress thinks that this is incorrect or if the law is not correct, because it doesn't stem from the Feres. It stems from if I'm really going to make it complicated for you, the Federal Tort Claims Act. The Federal Tort Claims Act says that there's one exception of people who cannot pursue a claim against the government, and those are people who are active military. So if Congress wants to fix it, they can fix it. That's what Scalia said. And so that's what we're looking to do. We're looking for Congress to fix it, and we're also looking for the court to also find that it's also unconstitutional and discriminatory in effect.
Let me just play devil's advocate here for a moment, and Richard, weigh in on this as well. Everybody knows who signs up for the military that you can't sue the government because they tell you. Like, it's a commonly known fact. And so from that end, there's a part of me as somebody who still wears the uniform for coming up on 20 years. And again, I understand it's malpractice, but you kind of know this is the risk you're taking going in, that if something goes wrong, you don't have much recourse. So from that end, I mean, how do you balance that out?
Can I answer that?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
So that statement of, I knew going into this that, you're not allowed to sue the government. That's kind of one of those, we know going into this as a black person that we have to sit in the back of the bus because that's the law. That's not an answer. I understand the law is the law, but that doesn't mean the law is right or the law is fair or the law is just. So I understand that you can walk in there going, okay, well, that's the law. Just like, many other laws, black people can marry white people. There was a case called Love versus Love. There's many laws out there that are not fair, and that's why they need to be fixed or challenged and reversed.
Richard, I mean, when I say that, have you heard that from anybody before? You knew what the deal was going in?
Well, yeah, nonstop. I've heard that, but and I agree wholeheartedly with Natalie. And my thing is this too: is it's not just me that it's happening to. It happens to family members. And that's the other side of this too. That's very important to me is that they're all applied to this. So every person who's a dependent underneath a service member is applied to this law. In most cases. So how does that make it fair to them? So it's not just because that law was there and it was put there a long time ago does not mean that's the same society we live in today. And I think it's worth being revisited and challenged. Okay,
Richard, let's get back to your health for a minute. Where are you right now? What is the current situation?
Currently right now I'm stage 4, so I'm terminally ill on palliative care. I just went through radiation last year for a tumor that was still growing. It's caused me quite a bit of pain, so I had to have some markers put in, got sick from that, ended up in the hospital. That's finally a little bit under control, but I take chemo pills twice a day. And like I said, I just kind of sit and wait till they run out or don't work and go from there.
Now, you're still on active duty. Are you going to work every day, or are you just they're allowing you to kind of stay home?
In the beginning, everybody was like, come to work. It'd be great for the mental. And, I would be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the break. It was kind of nice for what it's worth. But really up until now, I just kind of started venturing back here and there more. Beforehand, I really couldn't. I was between just being sick from any treatment or in excruciating amounts of pain. It was too hard before. So now I'm kind of at a semi-state to where it's manageable to get back up out of the house a little bit. So I'm trying.
What do your teammates say when you see them and talk to
them? Mostly they're just glad to see me there. It's I think it helps bring smiles to everybody's faces, to include my own. That you keep pushing through and you keep fighting. But these are guys I've been with for a long time now, and I think we just appreciate everybody's company daily.
I pause and I sigh because I just the totality of this kind of gets to me from the standpoint of and look, I'll just relate to you man to man and father to father. I mean, there's so much more on the line here than just a lawsuit for you. Your kids and your wife and everything that goes on. You've faced your own mortality before. Is it different in this arena when it's cancer and not combat?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different. One I knew I signed up for, and one I can say honestly I didn't sign up for.
Right.
My other thing is we've been at this war for how long? And it's going on, and to say that we don't deserve the best medical care, if not just standard medical care, as everybody else, and the same treatment. That hurts more than any wound I can sustain or suffer downrange any time of the day to me. And then I think a lot of guys and a lot of service members would agree. That's a relief lifted off their minds when they're downrange to know their families are getting great medical care, if not the same medical care as everybody else across the country. That's one other thing you don't want to have to think about when you're over there making decisions. Right. They're based off of your life or everybody else's life. Medical it's a big thing now. Like I said, guys are a long-lasting, long-time war. It's something we need, and it's something we have to keep going on. And so I think good standard medical care is something that's deserving.
How do you deal with the tough days? How do you deal with the days where it feels overwhelming? I actually had a day not too long ago where my limits were reached. I kind of lost it. I just gotta step back sometimes and lick my wounds and kind of regroup and get my composure back. It's not easy. Definitely figuring this one out. Nobody trained me for this one. That's for sure. Yeah.
So it's a tough one. My wife and I, we talk every day. We've definitely become a lot closer through this. Not the way you want to become close to your wife, but we know we've become truly the best friends that we've always thought we were. So it's I lean on her a lot, and my kids, I lean on them all the time too. When I have bad days, I'll go in and just sit with them and hold them and talk to them. And it's funny when they give me their advice, on how to get through things. So listening to a 10-year-old and 12-year-old talk to me how to get through the days is always going to bring a smile to your face.
Natalie, one final question for you. Legal things tend to take a really, really long time. I want to put this question delicately, but this may take longer than what Richard may be around to see. How entrenched are you in this fight?
Well, I'm working on this 25/8. It's not even. This has just become literally my sole purpose at this point. I put everything aside and just been focusing on this because I believe in it, and I believe that Richard should be able to see the fruit of his labor. I think it'll happen sooner than later. You can ask Richard. It's always like now, yesterday I wanted it, that kind of thing. So I'm not taking no for an answer from anyone, and we just keep pushing forward. And I believe I believe this will all come together fairly soon. I just think the most important thing that we're doing here, and that includes you, sir, is helping us get the word out, because I think the awareness is the most important part. And when people are aware of things, many people in America don't stand by and let injustices happen. We all speak up on so many issues in life. So these are one of those issues that we need to bring awareness to so we can fix it.
Richard, do you hope this is part of your legacy?
Absolutely. I just, I do. I really do. In short, yeah.
I mean, I'm getting emotional just because as we start to talk more, the whole thing.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, the whole thing starts to get to me, man. I mean, I just, God, I wish could throw my arms around you, brother, and just give you a freaking hug, because
I appreciate it.
I mean, this is a lot, man. No one deserves this. And all respect to what Natalie's doing aside, the legal part of this to me is secondary to watching a brother go through all this undeservedly. I just wish, I feel helpless. I wish there was something I could do. I don't know how to kind of put a bow on this whole thing in any sort of positive way. And I don't really think I should try at this point, but I just, brother to brother, I'm praying for you. Without knowing you, I love you. And I really wish that there is some sort of silver lining and happy ending to this for you, for your family, for your legacy, for everything, Richard. I truly do, man. I really mean that.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Wow. One of the heavier episodes we've done. Natalie Kawam, thank you so much for being here and joining us, because getting this side of it was so important. And Richard, please do everything you can to get well, stay well, keep your spirits up always. I know everybody listening to this is going to be praying for you and going to be on your side. And we hope that, whatever the medical prognosis and diagnosis is, that it starts to turn in your favor sooner rather than later for you, for your family, for your children, everything going forward. So Richard Stayskal, Natalie Kalam, thank you for being part of the Hazard Ground podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One postscript note before we sign off. Natalie Kawam, Richard's lawyer, wanted to remind us to send you guys to feresdoctrine.com. That's Feres Doctrine.com. Go there, read more about Richard's story, and also sign the petition to change the Feres Doctrine if you are so inclined. Again, feresdoctrine.com. Thank you guys for listening to this very, very important story, and we'll talk to you next week on The Hazard Ground.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.